Welcome everybody to Fashion for Goods Meet the Innovators event, and thank you all for joining us today. In today's edition, we're exploring the future for sustainable dyeing, and we'll be discussing concerns around the chemistry and safety of current solutions, the use of non-renewable sources for pigment and dye production, and some of the challenges to implementing new technology in the industry. And very sort of briefly on our agenda for today, we first have with us a lovely guest, Adriana Galiasovic, for a short fireside chat. In the second segment, we'd then be introducing a few of our cutting edge innovations in the space, followed by a discussion with all of our speakers. And with that, I think we can then move into our first segment. And probably, a little bit of background on Adriana before we begin. So Adriana Galiasovic is a designer, action researcher, and innovator, as well as an advocate for the circular economy in fashion, based on cradle-to-cradle design principles. Before starting out as a consultant, she spent the last decade working with G-Star Raw, where she collaborated with design, R&D, and sustainability teams to drive innovation and sustainable material transitions. We welcome you again, Adriana, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here.
So I think kind of just to start us off, I'd like to ask if you can tell us a bit more about your background and your experience in this space, especially when it relates to sustainable dyeing.
Yeah, sure. So when we look at the dyeing and the dye stuff, they're actually integral part of a larger processing network, which affects life below water, on the land, and air quality. So additionally, we all know aesthetically color can make or break style. So it's a really, really interesting area to work in. My focus on sustainable chemistry, research, and application processes of the dye started in 2008. When I started up a Denim Institute that was dedicated to celebrating past through historical and anthropological research, confronting the present by tackling the environmental denim production issues, and opening the doors to the future by promoting responsible innovation with strong focus on wet and dry processes. And later on, when I joined in G-Star in 2011, my work on sustainable dyeing continued via the brand, especially because in 2012, G-Star actually joined the Zero Discharge of Hazardous Chemicals, ZDHC group. This is a group of brands that works towards the shared commitment to lead the industry towards zero discharge of hazardous chemicals by 2020. A year later, G-Star also became a system partner of Blue Sign as an organization which supports responsible and transparent production. So for me as a designer working there, this meant that I had to innovate not only in how the products were looking or feeling, but also in terms of what kind of impact they have on people and planet. So all considered, my work resulted in some great innovations that were not only altering for the brand, but also for industry as a whole. I will give some examples. It's actually very nice to see Sarah here today, because back in 2015 or 16, we worked with Co2 Denim from USA to create some denim fabrics with her Stony Creek natural indigo. So in 2017, we also partnered with Archroma from Spain, and we were the first denim brand to bring them to market a range of denim products that were dyed with upcycled plant waste. In 2018, we were first to partner with the Officina 39 from Italy and bring out collections that were dyed with colors that were derived from upcycled textile waste. And in the same year, 2018, after many, many years of hard work with our supply chain partners, Dye-Star, who's the dye producer from Germany, and Artist Millers, Mill from Pakistan, we were actually able to bring to the market revolutionary indigo technology that was actually designed to leave a clean and a recyclable water effluent. So this actual collaboration resulted in creation of the world's first Cradle-to-Cradle certified gold denim fabric, which actually held a platinum score for material health, meaning it was designed with chemistry that presents zero risk for people and planet. And later on, based on the same principles, we also developed the most sustainable black. This was in partnership with our chroma and artistic milliners. That also resulted in the world's first Cradle-to-Cradle certified gold black denim fabric. So that's kind of my experience in short regarding the sustainable dyeing processes.
Yeah, no, super exciting. I think we're gonna move into some of those bits in a while. So I think we're having this discussion today really in recognition of that there is a problem, right, with the way things are, and maybe a very large question, but why is that change important? What are the reasons for wanting to change the way dyeing is currently done in fashion?
I mean, considering the scale of today's environmental concerns, we must go beyond just being less bad, or even beyond just being neutral, because we have an urgent situation. So instead, like, technology of the future should actually strive to create a positive impact. This is, of course, a journey of continuous improvement. And the most vital is to develop clean and safe chemistry, because only by having clean inputs can we have a clean output. So furthermore, it's important to produce ingredients in a closed loop or liquid discharge facilities and design them for optimized application processes, where actually number of steps are reduced in order to consequently save further resources. So, for example, since the introduction of the clean and recyclable water effluent indigo technology, which we introduced together with DyeStar, they have been building upon this innovation, working with mill partners in creation of the closed loop dyeing systems, where both indigo dye stuff and water from production is further filtered and reused, resulting in a dyeing ranges that could work without fresh water and even without new indigo inputs. So this is an idea of how we can improve for the future. Another example is last year through G-Star, I did a collaboration with Candiani, where we introduced the world's first regenerative indigo technology. This is where the waste from indigo dyeing process was actually designed to become fertilizer for the farms. And I think today's session is actually an excellent opportunity where we will have a chance to meet the innovators who will share some examples of this regenerative dyeing techniques and their technologies, which are designed actually to create a positive impact.
Right, thank you. And I think you did mention on your work with the Cradle-to-Cradle product standard, right? And what guidance does that offer on the role of, say, safer chemistry in the way new products are designed and developed?
I think we have a very versatile audience today. So I would touch upon briefly what Cradle-to-Cradle philosophy is and the standard. So Cradle-to-Cradle philosophy is actually inspired by nature. In nature, there is no concept of waste. Everything becomes food for another organism or system, and all the materials are reutilized in safe cycles. So in order to implement this philosophy, a Cradle-to-Cradle certification standard powered by the Cradle-to-Cradle Products Innovation Institute is used. And this is the most rigorous certification, and it's the only one designed for the circular product economy. It looks at design from a very holistic perspective by taking into consideration 5 different aspects. So one is material health, as you mentioned. Another one is water and soil stewardship, product circularity, social fairness, clean air, and climate protection as well. So when it comes to material health section, it's actually of vital importance, because in order to have safe material flows for the future, we also have to assure safe material inputs, as I mentioned before. So in order to understand the chemistry behind the products and assure health and safety, within this framework, all the substances that are included in product need to be analyzed on molecular level in terms of what they are and also how they interact in order to see if they may pose any risk to people and environment. So this type of work actually requires unparalleled level of transparency along the multiple tiers of supply chain in order to disclose all the substances first. And once they are disclosed, there's a toxicology assessment, which is made from 24 different points at 100 parts per million in terms of analysis. So after analysis, if something is not good in terms of material health, you have to really innovate the substitute solutions. So all in all, this cradle framework is actually an opportunity to design in a new way. And rather than seeing it as a barrier of very strict rules, I see it as an avenue for innovation and systemic change. So.
I think what's needed, yeah. And you did mention a lot of your collaborations, right? For example, with Acroma. And I think what really are these technologies that you feel are most exciting in the space now?
I think they're
the people already on the call. But
I mean, a common thread definitely is like using waste as a resource is an important one, not only in dye stuff sphere, but also in other industries. And if you want to move towards circularity, also like use of clean and safe dye stuff with an optimized application processes, which is regenerative by design. Another super important development, and one that I'm actually most excited about, is actually, bioscience, bioengineering, and biotech in this space. A great example of making strides in this space is actually one of the FFG innovators, Colorifics, which I believe I met them in 2017, and in color sphere, they really engineer natural solutions to man-made problems with help of bioscience. And also FFG had some other great innovators such as Hue, which is a extinctorium, working on creation of replacement for synthetic indigo using biotech. And then there was also Bio, which uses microorganisms to produce organic pigments to replace the petrochemical ones. And then, there's so many. And the Vienna Textile Lab, which turns bacteria into color, as well as algae life, creating dyes and fibers from algae or microorganisms. So there's so many. And I think this is like going to be a great opportunity for the future in terms of in the dye space.
Right. I think we are close to the end of time, but before I move to the innovators, and I'll bring you back. Are there sort of key elements that we consider when trying to imagine the future of sustainable dyeing? You've mentioned a couple, but
I think like collaboration and partnerships are very crucial in terms of changing the landscape of the future. So I mean, FFG is a great example of pulling together a network of innovators, supply chain, and brands, so they can actually leverage the developments together. A good example is also a nice partnership with two FFG innovators. So Officina Plus 39, which I mentioned before, and then Reverse Resources have partnered together. So Officina uses waste from Italy normally to create their pigments. And we worked with them also in Bangladesh. So sometimes we would have to ship the dye stuff also there. But recently they have partnered up with Reverse Resources, who has been doing waste mapping in Bangladesh for a few years now. So now they're working together to see how they can help and create a new infrastructure that will scale both of their innovations further. So for future, it's like partnering up of current dye suppliers with new startups in bioscience field will also be an exciting one. Yeah, so partnerships and collaborations, very important in order to move things forward.
I mean, it's really an entire ecosystem to shift.
Definitely.
And so, yeah, so I think, thank you very much for that, Adriana.
Thank you.
I'm going to move to the second section a bit, but I'll bring you back when we have our discussion.
Okay, thank you.
So I'd now like to introduce some of the innovators who are also on the call and let them tell us a bit about their solutions before we move on to our discussion. So I'm excited to have with us Nikhil, co-founder at Gravity Labs, join us today, whose technology turns end-of-life carbon emissions into industrial-grade materials, helping manufacturers produce more sustainably. I think the rest you can hear from him. So over to you, Nikhil.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm not sure which part of the world you're joining from. So it's my pleasure to be here today. A lot of things that I wanted to speak, Adriana has already covered some of them, but I'll just link through what she said. And I think something she very interestingly talked about is that nature doesn't know anything about waste, except for what has gone to Mars, ISS, and Moon, and the Voyager 1 and 2. Everything has remained within the Earth atmosphere for the last billion of years. What we are trying to do is pick one of the most harmful aspects of it, that is the carbon emissions, and convert them into something that could be useful. We are not doing dyes in yet, but we are doing the black color. I'm going to just run through that journey with you all. But before that, I do want to, basically put out in front of everyone, what is the problem that we're dealing with? Now, last 15, 16 months, we all have seen some significant challenges as a human race itself. And despite losing more than 4 million people, a lot of livelihood, we have still come out with certain solutions in terms of vaccines, which does address part of the problem. Unfortunately, climate change doesn't have that 1 year solutions, availability. You have almost last 30, 40 years of problem, starting from actually industrial revolution. You're losing 5 to 6 million people every year. It doesn't show up in the headlines in the newspapers or the TV conversations. But here is the thing, despite serious reduction in industrial activity over the last 12 months, in April 2021, we recorded the highest ever CO2 concentration. So imagine what would have happened if we wouldn't have even slowed down last year. This is the scale of the problem that we are dealing with. So what you're going to hear, what you heard from Adriana, what you're going to hear from me and everybody else, we are just trying to be part of the solution of what a very big problem. And I believe every solution would make sense. I hope ours do too. This was the part of the slide that I wanted to talk about, Adriana. Buckminster Fuller, long-time setback, pollution is nothing but a resource that we are not harvesting. And this is what we took 4 years back. And we said, let's prove Buckminster Fuller wrong. And we created Air Ink. Air Ink is a portfolio of inks that is made purely from carbon emissions. And basically what we are doing is we are reducing the carbon emissions that are up in the air. And while doing that, we are also replacing the carbon black, which is otherwise consumed during the ink making process. So basically taking out fossil fuels as much as we can. Now we know that somebody may say, hey, why are you trying to put a good spin around carbon emissions during this process? But hey, that's the thing. If you don't do that, people are gonna still consuming for next 20, 30 years. And by that time, that carbon budgets are gonna go for a toss. And we may not have that vaccine type of solution available to us. This is the only technical slide in my deck. This is what we essentially do. We work with factories, we harvest their carbon emissions, we treat them internally through dry processes to make them closer to carbon black, and then we work within ink manufacturing facilities to make inks in variety of different varieties that can be used for screen printing, offset, flexographic, and many other applications. But talking about collaborations, this is how we started. We did a collaboration with Heineken 4 years back. And this is the truck that actually delivers Heineken beer across London. And this was one of our first collaboration back in 2016, 17. And we started from this. The idea was very simple. Spread the word about, what you're seeing on my back of my screen is actually also a picture in London, where we painted the streets of the world with a simple idea to spread more and more awareness about the fact that air pollution is tangible. back then Donald Trump had just become the president, and there was a lot of things about climate change not being real, it's hoax, it's fake, just like fake news. And we wanted to just show to the world that it is not. It is right in your face. What you are seeing on these pictures is the pollution that you would have breathed otherwise, and that is what causes all the problems of asthma, cancer, and whatnot. Now, this is only for Indian audience. If they understand, this is Shah Rukh Khan, one of the most popular Indian actor. And this is how these collaborations kept developing. Over a period of time, there was initially a lot of artworks we did. And then slowly it led to some products like this. And this was our Kickstarter campaign. And again, that idea was still the same, keep spreading the word. Initially, we were not focused about building products in terms of scale, but getting the word right to the people, take it to as many people as we can. And I think this campaign went to about 45 countries. An artist, I think more than 10,000 artists during that period used earring all over the world and did some crazy work. And those artists then became, in a way, our brand ambassadors that led to a lot of other things. And that is what we have built over the last 3 years then. Initially, we did a lot of work in packaging and other stuff. So this, what you're seeing is a Dell laptop packaging printed with air pollution. On the right, you're seeing a MasterCard credit card. This is a special edition done in collaboration with Economy in Sweden, where everything is sustainable. The whole idea built by Economy was that everything has to be mapped. The one thing that was not mapped is the ink on it, because that is where we came from, that this also can be made from something that is not a virgin material. And this is what we did last year. For the first time, we were able to put air ink on apparel. This was a collaboration with Pengaya. Went live just a couple of days before, the Fashion for Good and cohort started for us. And this is the journey. This is the start for us in apparel industry. Right now, we are building a lot of solutions that could make our impact, deeper than what it is. It is just surface, printing right now. We are working on developing the dye stuff. We are also doing one thing that one of the FFG, cohort member this year is doing, that is CO2 dyeing. We're trying to get the CO2 dyeing for such solutions, that not only that the dye is waterless, but even the CO2 itself is coming from an pollution source rather than, virgin CO2. And yes, there is a lot of future to it. So what we are doing is we are making a carbon pigment that can go into many other things beyond fashion. And this is, for example, a carbon tile made in a collaboration with a wonderful designer based out of Mumbai, where we started putting our solutions into construction industry, which we talk about pollution, fashion being really polluting. We forget that concrete is one of the most built human material. Concrete is everywhere. And we often ignore, how real estate industry is also one of the biggest contributor of, of the air pollution problem. So these are certain interventions that we are building. Last 4 years, that has led to certain products like this, applications in packaging space, apparel space. Airing markers continue to be one of the most loved thing that I have built myself. Airing markers are the ways that artists have expressed their feelings about air pollution, like all over the world. And that is where, whether you believe me or not, all the collaborations that you saw on this slide were done because of some artist connected us to some company, to some designer sitting in some company and said, hey, why don't you use this? And I think that's the power of, going to the people instead of trying to just work through the supply chains. Once you get people to get the idea that, hey, this is something that can be done, you create the demand side attraction for the solution rather than push. And I believe whenever you have a pull coming from millions of people, solutions become very, it becomes so easy to scale those solutions, anywhere in any sort of problem. These are pretty much all what we can do with our technology. Right now, our focus is pretty much on apparel and packaging space, but there's a lot to do in future and make a lot of other applications much more sustainable. This is essentially what we are trying to do. The impact of how normal carbon emissions lead to, positive, higher carbon footprint, trying to convert that into a very negative, replacement technology, and do it in a way that we can create micro-circular economies globally. So that it's not that right now it's a hub and spoke model. We manufacture everything out of North India and ship it to different parts of the world. And unfortunately, zero shipping in India. We just ship out most of the things to China and Europe. Right now, we are working on how we can capture the pollution in those localities itself and recycle them in, without bearing the burden of the shipping carbon footprints. Our goal is that by 2030, we want to annually replace about 100 million tons of CO2 within these applications, while we build on something more that can be far more impactful. And this is what I'm going to leave you with. This is a slide that I often used a lot, especially whenever I have presented in US. And last 4 years, it was something very important. And this is the New York pollution getting upcycled in New York. Please get rid of the fake news. Air pollution is real, and it's going to become more and more real as we move forward. Support any solution that you like, whether it's an upcycling solution, whether it is just carbon storage solution, whether it is natural materials. Everything is going to bit by bit solve the whole problem. We are going to do our bit to it. So I hope I'm going to leave everyone with on today too. Air pollution is real. I hope you contribute to it by solving whatever you can do in your capacity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nikhil. That was great, very powerful image for sure. And up next, we have with us Stony Creek Colors, and we have Sarah Bellows, founder and CEO, who will dive into how they've developed plant-based indigo, displacing petrochemical-based synthetic dyes in the industry. Over to you, Sarah.
Great, thank you. Such an amazing presentation. Thanks for sharing those. That last one, really inspiring to see kind of on two different sides of the potential supply chain. I think, what I'm taking away from this is that there's so much opportunity to bring clean and safe colors from a variety of the actual raw materials to replace the petrochemicals that we're using today. So much abundance of carbon, whether you're choosing one from pollution or in our case, the plants that we are having farmers grow are photosynthesizing and pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere, and that's the carbon building blocks for our colors. So I'm Sarah Bellows, founder and CEO of Stony Creek Colors. We are a natural indigo dye manufacturer, and we are really focused on innovating for a new future for plant-based color. Our primary vision really is to bring plant-based color from traceable and renewable resources to allow safe and beautiful textiles to come to the market at scale. And at the same time, we're offering an enriching rotation crop for farmers. I'll touch a little bit on what that means for us, but in general, what we found in now investing in this crop, the indigo varieties, is that both investing in the system for how the extraction works, as well as the agronomics of how farmers can grow the crop in a regenerative way. We know that it is possible to replace all of the synthetic indigo used globally, about 142 million pounds, rotating with less than 1% of the world's cotton acres. And that's important because our crop actually can add value to cotton rotation, as well as other crop rotations that we're currently working with farmers to grow in. So a lot of opportunity for us, I think, to take a step back from the petroleum-based economy we're in right now and say, how can we design solutions that are going to be more circular and closed loop? So as I mentioned in the beginning, our plant is taking CO2 through the photosynthetic process, and it's making the chemistries that then we extract from the plant. We have some other closed loop systems that we utilize in our actual manufacturing process, everything from producing compost from our spent biomass to treating our wastewater and reusing that through multiple extraction processes, and then using that to irrigate our farmers' other crops. We're growing indigo as a rain-fed crop in Tennessee and Kentucky, where we're based. So one of the things that's really different about this compared to the conventional synthetic indigo process is when you look at synthetic indigo, it is a very typical linear cradle to grave process. And along the way, it uses a lot of hazardous, carcinogenic, or toxic chemistries. So everything from benzene, which is petroleum-based, to aniline, formaldehyde, cyanide. It takes over 2 kilos of cyanide to produce 1 kilo of synthetic indigo. So actually, it's not just about the safety of the chemical at the end of that process, but what other petroleum-based or toxic chemistries are used to actually manufacture the process. Really high reaction conditions and cooling conditions required, so a lot of energy that goes into actually creating the synthesis along the steps for making synthetic indigo. So we know a better way is possible. That's really what we've been focused on proving at Stony Creek Colors, while also innovating the business model to allow plant-based color to color all of our denim in the future. So we've been focused on creating really a drop-in replacement for synthetic indigo. We have some new innovations coming out in early 2022 that actually will allow a complete hydro-free dyeing system, which is one of the other reducing chemistries used in denim dyeing, and really allow it to be not just a drop-in replacement, but actually better than the standard powder indigo dyeing process, which is used in about 65% of global denim mills still today. We are definitely helping our farmers improve their soil health through offering a regenerative rotational crop. So our crop fixes nitrogen, which is a really important benefit for increasing yields of future crops while also decreasing the need for synthetic fertilizers in that current cropping year. Bringing more carbon into the soil in addition to what we're bringing in through composting, and lowering nematodes and other pests that would be typical in other more conventional crops. So ultimately, this is helping brands reduce the hazardous chemicals used in their supply chains, but also really importantly, bring a profitable cash crop for farmers. So just as in the previous presentation that you saw, I think the exciting part for us is that there's so much opportunity to replace climate negative chemicals with climate positive chemicals. And in the case of Stony Creek Colors indigo process, we're actually able to sequester or have a CO2 offset of 170 kilos estimated of CO2 equivalent per 1 kilo of indigo of the Stony Creek Colors dry pure indigo. So really flipping the chemical from being one that's draining and negative for the climate to one that's actually climate positive. So we're happy to share more info with those who are interested, but that comes out to about 3.8 pounds or 1.7 kilos of CO2 equivalent offset per pair of jeans on average. And we're definitely looking always for ways to keep support fashion brands that are using our product in telling that carbon story as well. So we have brands like Levi's, Wrangler, Patagonia, who have now started using our plant-based indigo and are working with them and more brands to bring the crop to a larger scale so it can be more impactful for farmers and for this carbon offset. Some of the other benefits on the slide I already mentioned really that, but one of the important things for us really is closing the loop on that carbon cycle. The way I would say that we got here and what has been unique about how we've approached plant-based indigo is that we really looked at developing the entire agricultural value chain. So everything from the seed and the genetics, the source of the plant material, improving that so that there's more yield per acre and so the crop can be more resilient and stable over time. So we've done that with our own proprietary in-house research and breeding team through not just how the farmer grows the crop, allowing a mechanized production system for bringing the crop up to scale, but also for us innovating the way that the dye is extracted so that it can be made consistently on a year-round basis. So really transitioning growers on a larger scale for larger ecosystem impact, but also allowing us to bring that product in a way that's going to be stable for the business through consistent manufacturing processes. So ultimately, this allows us a higher yield per plant, more yield per acre, which is great for the farmers, and a higher purity product, which is great for customers really who need this to serve as a drop-in replacement for the while polluting, very consistent synthetic indigo that they're all using today. So this is just a picture from our factory to end on. We are operating in a converted tobacco factory that was abandoned in Springfield, Tennessee, in a rural area, and really are looking at indigo as a way to bring a new profitable rotation crop to more farmers, while also helping brands reduce the negative impact of their denim dyeing processes. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Lovely ending there, very cool factory. So I think I'm going to start with my first question. So Adriana, in your view, having worked to sort of develop some of these collections, right? What are some of these key hurdles for innovations to have to overcome when trying to replace traditional colors? I think that's a big one that both innovators feel on their side, but also it's very keen for brands when they try to implement these solutions.
I mean, in addition to the regular things like investments and incentives, in my experience, there seems to be like 3 key challenges that keep on reappearing. So one is scalability, second one is performance, and the third one is the aesthetic. So to scale, as mentioned before, partnerships play a really crucial role. It's important for the new technology initially to be pluggable into an existing machinery or a system in order to actually reach scale. I think at this point, Sarah, you will probably not be replace the entire synthetic indigo, and not all synthetic indigos are created equal. So I think, if you can conquer the powder indigo and then market, which should be abolished, I think. That's one part, but in the area of the pre-reduced indigo, we do have some good innovations as well. So, just the idea that you have to be able to be plugged in, and Sarah knows that her technology is now pluggable into the larger system, so it will be easier for her to scale. And the other aspects that I mentioned is a need to meet the performance and aesthetic standards, which are dictated by the brands. So that's something that's very important. The color fastness issues, also like certain looks. If it's not looking good or if it's not consistent, brands have problems selling it. I mean, when we would do earth colors or other technologies that maybe couldn't guarantee the crazy consistency, we would write about it, about the uniqueness of the color and try to justify the different aspects and the beauty of aesthetics that can actually come out of it. But not everybody's prepared to do that. So overall, yes, there are challenges, but I believe that we are creative species and that are living in the 21st century that is equipped with unparalleled knowledge, connections, and tech to date. And I think these challenges, yes, they are challenges, but also great opportunities to create something better.
Very nice and very optimistic. I think I'd like to follow up on that question with Sarah. So I think with sort of the fair number of different players you really bring together, what are some of the challenges you faced? And I think maybe if you could also highlight a bit of the drawbacks of using sustainable dyes. Maybe we could hear a bit of that as well. Yeah, over to you.
Yeah, I think that for Stony Creek, we were really focused since the inception of our business on transitioning the way that plant-based indigo was grown and processed and brought to scale. And indigo as a crop has been around for over 5,000 years. So there's like this tremendous knowledge across history and across the globe on using these plants in culturally appropriate ways. And what we were really focused on doing was saying, how can we grow this crop and process it in a new way that will allow it to replace the synthetic indigo? So there were challenges, I think, for us in making that leap from a more artisan producer to one that was developing a new business model built to scale, because really that's quite different than getting something to great operational efficiency for at a small scale. And so that took a lot longer than we expected, both in breeding the crop, but also in developing kind of profitable systems for the farmers to grow it. And I think that the challenge for us was really, how can we produce the crop in a way that is going to support fair wages for the growers and for the workers, while also making something competitive in the marketplace. And that, I would say, continues to be a challenge, but certainly, as Adriana mentioned, there's a growing number of brands who are really taking this deeper look at their supply chain. So yeah, I think drawbacks in general are when the system is great at really small scale, but you need to develop it into something that's going to be actually usable by major mills around the world and major brands in it, consistently.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think one of the topics Adriana, you brought up earlier was how these solutions need to be good for people and planet, right? And I think with Nikhil, with Gravity, I mean, you're really working with a fairly large externality that you're bringing back into the supply chain. How do you see the way forward for your company and like the impact proposition for brands?
Yeah, I think for us, it has not been a challenge to, the impact proposition for brands has been pretty much clear. It has been just that putting it into some sort of framework was a challenge, because I don't think even today, but anybody was trying to do that. Okay, we will capture air pollution and then put it into some sort of a use. Even when we started off, we didn't have that in our mind. In the sense, we didn't have a mind that I'm going to talk to fashion industry as my primary, target. We were more and more as a team focused on capturing as much as we can. So that is where we were getting driven from. I think we don't see that as a challenge. The one thing that we are trying to work on, though, is how can we improve the impact? So last 3-4 years have been more about, hitting those minimum standards that, hey, the ink is safe as per RSL, ink is performing as a normal ink would do. It doesn't require any change in processes to use it. But then there's a lot more to do, because at the end of the day, we replace about 30 to 40% of the ink composition. The rest of the 60%, 70% still remains traditional binders, dye, base, which we are not right now working on. So that is what the future, I believe, for us is, that how can we make 100% of the ink itself, completely coming from a non-virgin source, so 30-40 we're going to do. How do we do the remaining part of it is one of the things that we're working on. Adding to that, what we are also trying to do is capture more and more CO2 into the same amount of ink. And that is where I think going to the impact proposition is going to become much easier for the brands. That, okay, it was, let's say if it is just about carbon black replacement, now we are doing more than that. So doubling the impact or tripling the impact. That is, I believe, from our side, that is what we are focusing more and more on. We haven't ever faced a challenge that a brand comes to us and feels that, hey, we don't understand the impact side of it. So I think that has been a pretty easy story to tell for us.
Okay, very cool. And I think there's this idea that the impacts that are reflected really go beyond the brand or manufacturer, right? It's something that goes, there's much wider. I think it's especially true for your solution, Sarah. And I wanted to hear a bit more about your work with farmers, especially like in looking at the agricultural side, and how does that kind of work within your process? Yeah. So you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. So, farmers are definitely the backbone of the work that we do, and a big focus of our innovation. So there are a couple main reasons growers want to grow the crop and also want to choose it over other potential rotation crops. So one is that we've tried to make the lower the barriers for a farmer to grow this crop profitably. So that means as a business, we're actually doing the seed, we're supplying the seeds, we are supplying the equipment for doing the harvesting at a large scale. So for growers that are looking for a rotation crop but don't necessarily have the capital to completely transition to a new crop, we really are lowering those kind of barriers to entry. They want to grow it because, as I mentioned, it's a legume. It is fixing nitrogen, and it's actually feeding the next, the following crops in the rotation with a source of that that nitrogen in the soil, improving soil organic matter, and decreasing other pest pressure. So I think that what we're seeing is growers wanting to improve their soil health while also keep farming and keep making a living on the farm. And that's something that they can do with the plant-based indigo.
Right. Okay. And I think some of the elements we've considered is that the problem is really something with multiple moving parts, right? And I kind of wanted to bring the discussion back to the collaboration aspect of it. I think a few of you mentioned also. And Adriana, you've worked on some exciting sort of partnerships and collaborations like the Cradle-to-Cradle Product Innovation Institute's library. And are there any important learnings you'd like to share around bringing this from more of a competitive space to one that is centered on collaboration?
Yeah, I mean, even like collaboration is not only key to innovation, but pretty much to like everything that we all do, right? Like, I don't think I would ever be able to develop any of these things without collaboration with other people. So in an industry context, one brand using an innovative solution alone, it can't change the entire denim industry. So this is why when we developed the world's first Cradle Gold certified denim fabric with our partners in 2018, we actually made it open source. So this meant that other brands could use the fabric, and that other mills, even outside our own network, could learn about the revolutionary hydrosulfate-free indigo technology, which was then introduced. So this way they could actually adapt positive indigo dyeing practices in their own productions. So Cradle-to-Cradle Products Innovation Institute has this materials library registry, which can be found on their website, and it's really a great resource for finding healthy building blocks and healthy products. We use the library to showcase our certified products, as well as a resource in finding new ingredients. So I think collectively along the supply chain and with brands, we actually need to work together to further evolve the library and share the knowledge, especially on these pre-competitive materials such as fibers, dyes, and trims. So yes, that's my experience in terms of collaborative sphere and kind of creating a pre-competitive pool. I mean, FFG also does the same thing by bringing together the supply chain and the brands and the innovators. They can pool together and leverage the volumes of the innovations. So there's a way to do things.
Thanks for that. And I think my next question for Nikhil. So even your team has worked with, like you said, supply chains, both in and outside of fashion, right? Do you have any learnings from how do you sort of find the right partnerships, or what do you look for in bringing that to life? Because obviously a collaboration with Pangaya as well, you mentioned, but yeah.
So I'm going to link it to a question that Kubdu asked in the chat, and which is about, do we need to really adjust the standards that we have in the industry in order to allow the certain new innovations to be, even adopted. And I think that's the key that we have learned. You have to find partners who are ready to work with you. There is no defined formula for that. I'm sure, for every 10 conversations that have not gone well, it has been only 1 or 2 that go well for us. And I think that's, I'm sure, applies to everybody else in this room right now. So the learning that what we have seen is that there is one big difference between fashion and for the other things that we do is fashion is a very, consumer front sort of an approach where they have to be, I think, reasonable within their reasonable, approach. They have to be far more conservative about what sort of new things they are bringing on board. And, therefore, I don't mind when people are conservative and they have, more questions about what we are doing and how do we get it right. But I think the right sort of partners, which Pangaya has been for us for our last 7 months now, is that the right partners are the one who get you to show you the right path to, how you want to end in a right place. And I think this is what I think the partnerships have been about. For us, we have been lucky that, a lot of good conversations have aligned up really well. So for example, right now working with Diageo, which is very different application for us as a product, And we have seen that they are, listing out for what we need to do, when we want to do that. And they're not telling us, unless until you do all this, we're not going to touch you. So I think that is sort of learning for us. And I think the key is that you go out and talk to as many people as you can. Don't try to just talk to your immediate customer. So we never reached out to the printers in the early days. We actually reached out to the brands. And that led to a very different form of, again, as I said, pull sort of a thing coming from the demand side. And that led to faster adoption in some cases. And I think that is what I learned over the last 4 years. Don't talk to the immediate guy, because that guy has a lot of other things in his mind. You talk to, the end user as much as you can, and that's where you get to really understand, whether you are in the right direction or not. And I think that's what has happened to almost all the collaborations we have pulled up till now.
Okay, very, very nice. And I think we are about time to close. I'm not sure if Vinita is still on the line, but I wanted to ask for sort of a one-liner from all of you on really what gives you guys hope for a better industry. And maybe we can start with you, Sarah, and then you can sort of nominate the next person.
Sure. So as Adriana said, getting even just 65% of the denim that's dyed with synthetic indigo replaced with our plant-based solution is like a 7.1 billion CO2 equivalent opportunity to capture more carbon from the air. So that might be more than a one-liner, but I think that the promise for us is in replacing hazardous chemicals with something that is not just less negative, but actually really a positive for the entire globe.
You want to nominate?
Sure, Nikhil.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I think one thing that I like today is that whatever my thoughts are already covered by Adriana. So that shows that we are on a right path. And I think if that sort of a commonality among all the innovators with different approaches, I think sooner or later we will have that, ecosystem where new innovations can go to, product line, the production line much faster. I think that's what is the takeaway from me. And I'm really glad that almost everyone feels the same way in certain aspects of this. I think that is the most important thing for me. And I'm really glad that, Adriana, you said that some of those things. And yeah, I'm really glad to be looking at what Sarah and Vinita is doing. Unfortunately, Vinita couldn't present to us, but, T. Hughes, we have seen being part of FFG, and I'm really glad that, such solutions are coming up. Yeah. Vinita, if you're there, if you want to, take forward from here.
Yes. So sorry, I could present the presentation, but I'll try to record it and put it on so everybody could see it. And the message I would like to say is collaboration between two industries where it is mutually benefited for both industries, like waste of one product, waste of one factory could be a product for another industry. So that has what we have been doing to 3 U's. So waste generated from a tea manufacturer is a dye for another industry. So in this way, we have saved a lot of carbon dioxide footprinting, and I think that is the key message I would like to take you through TUs.
Thank you so much, Anita. Okay, would be, yeah, maybe Adriana, you want to go next? You're on mute. Sorry.
Oh, one-liner? I guess we should all take inspiration from nature in order to, create healthy ecosystems where the waste doesn't exist in every aspect of different productions, be it fashion, be it dyes, be it anything. But the concept of eliminating the concept of waste, right?
Yeah, I think a beautiful way to end the discussion today. I want to thank all of the speakers for your time, and obviously the audience as well. Really sorry, Vinita, about the technical issues, but I'm sure we'll get the information to the audience somehow. And I'd like to also remind all of you to follow us on Instagram to be in the know for our next event. And thank you all for being here today.
Thank
It's a
you
pleasure.
all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a great one.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.